There were different reasons. First of all, the more I found out about this family, the more I understood about the relations between the different levels of power and the sharing of responsibility, between the main perpetrators like Heinrich on the one side and supporters like his brothers, parents, neighbors and friends. The structure of my family is somehow reflecting the reasons for the growing of Nazism in those years and is helping to understand why so many middle-class people supported a terror regime actively. There was a huge diversity of motives. Some of them have been radically anti-Semitic. Many of them just wanted to do their job as good as they could. Others were mainly interested in personal profits and careers. The mortal efficiency of the Nazi terror regime seemed to be based exactly on the perfect teamwork of the different levels of power, the different groups of professions of society, and the mixture of different interests. But also for the time after 1945, the dealing with the past in the Himmler family seemed to be quite symptomatic to how most Germans did. No one was speaking about the past, and no one was asking questions about. For most Germans it was clear that only Hitler and his entourage was responsible for all the committed crimes. Hitler had promised them a glorious future, but in the end Germany was completely destroyed, millions had died or lost their home. They, the so-called supreme race of Aryans, had lost the war. Many people just felt betrayed by Hitler. They had so much pity with themselves after the war that there was not any pity left for the real victims. In the next years, Germany was busy with building up the country, getting wealthy again, and besides, learning democracy. And they did it, of course, with the same profoundness and seriousness like Germans are doing everything. When the students' movement started in 1968, German society was at a point where the second generation, the children of the bystanders and perpetrators, were grown up and started to confront the parents with the past they have never spoken about. The many letters and emails I got from this and the following generation in the last years were allowing me to gain a deeper insight into the dramas that have taken place in many German families for decades because of the legacy of silence, as the Israeli psychologist Dan Baron called it. But I also got the impression that there is a strong desire in the second and third generation to speak finally about the hidden family secrets. On the other side, the many positive reactions from survivors of the Holocaust and their children, or from East Europeans who suffered horribly under the Nazi terror, show me how important it was for them to understand that there was a descendant of Nazi families going in clear distance to the crimes their ancestors have committed. Some of these Jewish or Polish survivors and their children have become my good friends. These friendships alone are worth the effort of having written a book and also the trouble I got with some few members of my own family. Another reason for publishing my family story was that during my research it became more and more clear that the common picture of Heinrich Himmler as a bizarre outsider, as the black sheep of a normal family, was less and less convincing. Of course, we all prefer to keep a clear border between us, the normal people, and them, the evil perpetrators. But defining them as inhuman monsters doesn't help us to understand why they did such inhuman things. The German historian Michael Wild has revealed the scaring fact that those SS officers who planned the mass murders of the European Jews and others in the Reichssicherheitshauptamt of the SS were highly educated and cultivated men, many of them even having a doctor's degree. Most of them took part in the mass murders actively, and after 1945, almost none of them ever had an awareness of injustice or a feeling of worry and pity towards the victims. Excuse me, please, I have a cold.
hard to understand how those perpetrators could go home after the daily killing and be normal husbands and parents and fathers. They obviously had no problems with the contradiction of taking care for their own families and murdering other families, as the latters were officially defined as enemies and non-humans. The huge majority of Germans was not killing people. Nevertheless, they were profiting from the regime as it was offering work for everybody and a lot of reliefs in organizing daily life. And the exclusion and persecution of those who were defined as not belonging to society offered the possibility to the included of feeling superior to the excluded. The transformation or deformation of civil rights offers all further measures against the excluded, from discrimination in daily life over deportation and robbing their property, unto the last consequence of exterminating them because, in the logic of this system, it just had to be done. For Heinrich Himmler, it was always important to emphasize that killing Jews, Russians, Sinti and Roma and many others was not based on hate or sadistic feelings towards them, but that it should happen with decency and correct behavior. While Himmler was giving the order to his SS men to kill millions of people, on the other side he was strictly against enriching from the property of the murdered humans. The history of National Socialism in Germany, but also the history of other terror regimes in the 20th and 21st century practicing genocides, shows that violence is not an archaic but a modern phenomenon. It has specific social and historical reasons and is practiced in a specific context of sense, making the violence not only reasonable but even inevitable. That brings us to the question, of course, why some Germans resisted to the Nazi regime or saved the life of persecuted people.